G'day divers and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about using the Divevolk +8 macro lens and the Divevolk +18 macro lens and how to get great underwater macro with your mobile phone.
I know it's bad, but I can't help myself. When I feel sad, I escape from my sense. Lately music's been my reminiscence. That's when I listen. I know it's bad that I can't help myself. When I get mad, I set fire to the hell. The only way to keep it at a distance, that's when I listen. Music is the reason why I stay. A cheering melody will fix a melancholic heart. The music is the reason. The music is the reason why I stay.
Now, if you haven't seen my video on why the Divevolk housing is the best housing for mobile phones, check that out first. It is not a question, it is just a fact, and it really is highlighted when it gets into macro. And the reason being is without being able to use third-party apps, you're going to have a lot of trouble. Focusing in macro videography especially on a fixed aperture camera like a mobile phone is particularly difficult. So you are going to need access to those third-party apps where you've got some extra features like really good focus and really good focus peaking. And the only way you can access those sorts of apps is by using a Divevolk housing, because you can use any app that you want and use your phone just like you would above water. Even things like tap to focus, being able to point on the screen and tap the section that you want to be in focus is critical to nailing macro videography and photography on a phone, only possible on the Divevolk system. So I recently went on a trip to Tulamben in Bali, Indonesia, one of the macro meccas of the world, and I was using the Divevolk housing with my Google Pixel 9 Pro and my Samsung mobile phone, using both of these wet lenses. I have also used this system and these lenses with an iPhone, so I've used all three major brands, and quite frankly, it doesn't matter which one you're using. Use whatever phone you prefer to have above water as your underwater video and photo. It's not worth trying to buy a phone based purely on which one is better underwater, because I could sit here and argue about all three all day about which one's better. So, if you really want to know why I own a Google, it's because value to money at the time, it was half the price, it was on special, than buying another Samsung. And I use an iPhone at work, and I don't like being tied into that system. That is it. It's not because I'm saying any three of them are much, much better underwater than one of the others. They are that close, it's not funny, and I could give you positives and negatives of all three of those phones underwater. If I could combine all three together, that would probably be the best mobile phone. They're all very similar. They all work very similar with these lenses, and they all work very similar when it comes to macro. So your first option with macro is to use your inbuilt macro capabilities of your phone. Now the problem is you're likely to first be really excited about how great your phone does macro, only to be really disappointed when you look at it on anything other than your phone or a small screen. The problem is, in all those phones, the only macro lens you have is your ultra wide lens. All the other lenses are not macro lenses, and then they use tricks of software to make you think you have zoom lenses. You don't have a zoom lens, you have three fixed lenses, and they'll make you think you have three macro lenses, which you don't. You have one macro lens, three fixed lenses. There's no way around it. The rest is digital manipulation. Now, if you're just going to look at it on your phone or social media, that might be fine. but unfortunately some of it is really extreme digital manipulation. So a perfect example, I'll use the Google as an example to get the distances exactly right, but all three phones are very similar, it's just slight changes. Is the Google has a 5 times optical lens. Above water, it focuses to 75 centimeters. Once you're closer than 75 centimeters, if you're in the standard Google camera app, it will then automatically drop back to the main lens and will use a digital zoom to make you think you're still using the 5 times optical. Then as you get closer than 11 centimeters, it will then drop back to the ultra wide lens, which is the only macro lens on the phone. Same with all the brands. So now it is using a digital zoom to scale up a 0.5 lens to a 5 times lens. So 10 time digital zoom. Then it will use some fancy tricks to try and make that photo look less digital zoomed, and same with your video. Now with a photo, it works okay on your phone. It'll look fine on your phone, and that's why when you're on social media, you'll see all these people saying, oh wow, look how great the macro is on my iPhone, how great Samsung. It's not, it's crap. I'm going to say it right now, it's crap. It looks great on your phone, yes, but it's a photoshopped, digitally manipulated image. It is nothing like what you actually took a photo of, and it's not good. And when it comes to video, it's even worse, and that's when you're probably going to pick it up because you're more likely to be looking at your video on a TV screen, for instance, and you're suddenly going to realize that your 4K footage looks worse than high definition because it might be zoomed in digitally by 10 times by your phone, and that is well below HD quality. And if I'm filming 4K, I want 4K. So the only way to truly get macro, unless you're going to leave it in ultra wide and have a very wide macro shot, is to use wet lenses. Now, to use a wet lens, you really want to be using a third-party app. The problem with all the main brands, whether it's Apple, Samsung, or Google, is their standard camera apps are not very feature friendly. Okay, they're mainly designed for consumer, for taking photos with a lot of digital tricks, like portrait, for instance. You're not really taking a portrait photograph, it's using digital manipulation to blur the background because people like it. But that's not much good to you when you really want to take quality photography and videography with your mobile phone. We need to know when we start using wet lenses which lens we're using, because if we have it so it suddenly decides to change lenses, this isn't going to work at all. Because what we need to do is decide which lens we're going to use and then put your wet lens directly centered over the lens you're going to use. So you're unlikely to ever use your ultra wide lens with a wet lens, well, with a macro wet lens, I should say, because it's already macro anyway. So you're either going to center it over your main lens, your 1 times lens, or over your telephoto lens, whether that's a 3 times or a 5 times or whatever is on your camera. Now, the telephoto is the big one. Nearly all of those manufacturers, it is very hard to switch off the setting that stops it from moving from the telephoto to the main lens. And what you're going to find is you're going to put your wet lens over the telephoto lens. As soon as it can't focus, it will drop back to the main lens, and then that won't be lined up with the lens, and it'll just be a mess, and you'll get so frustrated because you just can't get it to stay on the lens that you want it to be on. That's why a third-party app is key. I would recommend Blackmagic. I'm going to talk about Blackmagic for a couple of reasons. One, it's available on iOS and Android, so it's relevant to everybody. 2, it is the best price you could ever pay for an app. It is totally free. And 3, it is one of the best apps. There are apps I'd probably say are better, but they're paid apps and only available on one system. And now, switch focus peaking on. If you don't know what focus peaking is, it is a color on your screen that will show where is in focus. Now, why that is important is because when you use a wet lens and do macro, the focusing distance, the depth of field is going to be tiny, and it's going to be very hard to know what is and isn't in focus. So focus peaking is the key to getting good underwater videography. You'll be able to see by the red color in Blackmagic exactly where is in focus instead of trying to tell with your eyes if it's in focus or not. You really won't be able to tell on the screen without focus peaking. So switch your focus peaking on so you can see what is in focus. And the other thing that Blackmagic is going to do is now when you select a lens, that is the lens it's going to stay on. It's not going to try and use any digital manipulation or swapping lenses. There's no zoom or anything in there. So you're either going to choose your main 1x lens or your telephoto lens and use that lens with your wet lens. Now, it is particularly difficult to do macro videography just because of that really close focusing and that very small depth of field. But it is very enjoyable, and you get to see some little creatures that you can't even see with your eyes. You'll see some of the clips that I put up. I mean, some of these things that I filmed are the size of a grain of sand. I really couldn't see them at all with my eyes, and then you put the wet lens on, especially on the 5x optical lens, and suddenly that grain of sand is an image on your screen. It's just, obviously, when you've got a grain of sand stuck to the side of a leaf, the minutest bit of movement, and it's going to go from in focus to out of focus, and that's where you have troubles. So which lens out of these two lenses would I get? Well, it's a tough one. If I was new to macro videography, because I know that it often people give up because it's frustrating and difficult to do, then I would just buy the +8 because it's $129 and it's extremely cheap. That is very cheap for a macro lens. And it's good. It's good quality for its price, but it's $129 US lens. That's what it is. So, you know, if I grab this lens, although it's, you know, actually probably the same size as the +18, I would say, as a guess, this is about 4 times heavier. And why is it 4 times heavier? Because this is glass and aluminium, and this is plastic. So, you know, you already can feel the quality difference between them, but this is a $400 US lens, and this is a $129 US lens. You will also see a big difference in the quality. The sharpness in this Pro lens is really nice. This is worth $400 US. I've got no problem. This is a lovely lens. But if you're new, do you want to spend $400 US on a lens that you might get frustrated with? Because using either of these lenses is going to be difficult at first. It's going to take practice, which is why I would say if you've got the money and you've done macro videography before and you know what you're getting into, I would buy both lenses. The +18 can sometimes be just too much of a diopter strength to use, and you might want to drop back to the +8. In fact, my recommendation to Divevolk's been, and I really hope that they do it, is they actually make a full Pro range where they have matching lenses for this. I would love to see a +6, a +12 in the same Pro quality as this +18. To me, that would be gold. I could jump from +6 to +12 to +18, depending on the size of the macro that I'm shooting. You do have the advantage on a mobile phone that you can jump between, obviously, your main lens and your telephoto lens. So you do have a fair range between them. So it's not too bad on your main lens to use the +18, but it would be nice to have a far less strong lens. Now, if you do have the +8, don't buy the +18 thinking that it's going to be that much more zoom. That's not how diopters work. Sure, it's magnified more, but +8 to +18 sounds like a heap, but it's not the way a diopter works. So it is more powerful. It's just not going to be crazily more powerful. What it's going to be is sharper, much sharper because of those better optics, and that's what you get when you pay for a Pro lens rather than a cheaper lens. This lens, though, you can get some good shots out of it. In fact, if you can shoot with this, you can definitely shoot with this. This one's a little bit less forgiving because it isn't as sharp and it is the cheaper lens. But it's worth starting on. I would say it works best actually at 2x lens, and then that's actually what they recommend as well. Now that depends on your phone, how happy you're with that. The Google, for instance, at 2x is still sensor crop, so it's still a good image. If you're using that on an iPhone, well, it is going to be a digital zoom. I'm normally okay with a 2x digital zoom. Anything more than that is going to look horrible. So it does depend on your phone a little bit. Like I said, on a Google, it's not going to make any difference because it's a sensor crop instead of a digital zoom. But then if you're using a Samsung or an Apple that's got a 3 times telephoto, then this is easier to use too than the 5 times on the Google. So it depends on which mobile phone you're using and which model within that series. So if I was just starting out, I would just start with the Plus 8. If you've got a bit of experience, I would jump straight to the Plus 18. If you've nailed the Plus 8, then it is worth spending the money on the Plus 18 if you really enjoy doing macro. But I wouldn't go out and spend $400 on a lens until you know it is something that you like doing, because it does take time and it does take practice and it does take patience and it does take specific types of dive locations. You can't be going on a cattle boat. If you go to Koh Tao and you're on a boat with 50 divers and you're getting dragged behind some dive master who probably has done 20 dives and is telling you how cool they are, you're not going to have time to be taking macro videography. If you're going somewhere where you can solo dive with your own buddy, have your own guide, and take all the time in the world, then macro is awesome and diving's also awesome. If you've been stuck going on those kettle boats, please take the time to go out and find out what diving really is like and learn how to dive without a guide. Or even better, learn how to solo dive, because it takes your diving to a whole new level. Certainly if you're into photography and videography and into macro, because I could spend time in Indonesia. I had one-on-one guide, or I was by myself or with my son. And if I went down, for instance, a pygmy seahorse, I could spend the entire time there. And if I went into deco, that was me. I'm trained to do deco, and I could go do a deco stop, and I wasn't with some recreational dive master who was freaking out as soon as you got anywhere near deco, because apparently, according to PADI dive professionals, 1 minute of no decompression time is okay, and deco, you are going to somehow explode. One isn't safe and one's not dangerous. It's just diving. Do a deco stop. But I digress. So I hope that helps. I'm going to do a video on full macro. It's just a bit trickier with a mobile phone. It is a little bit more specific to the phone itself. But the main keys, takeaways is try a third-party app. Try Blackmagic. It's free. You've got nothing to lose. Turn on focus peaking. Use a tripod. Be as calm and slow as you possibly can, and just really look at that focus peaking and try and nail down your focus. Start with a simple lens. Start with putting it on your main lens so it's got less zoom, just that 1 times lens, and then build up to getting a more expensive lens and start using it on your telephoto lens, where you're going to start getting those ridiculously close shots of little critters no bigger than a grain of sand. So I hope that helps. Until next time, don't forget to keep blowing bubbles, and never forget, the deeper you go, especially if you go solo diving, the further you get away from all those idiots.